All right, welcome everybody to the July 29th, 2025 meeting of the Single Exit Multiplex Housing Tag meeting. Can we go through a attendance? Dustin.
Annette, are you there for me?
Yep, I'm here. Okay. Roger Haringa.
I'm here.
Sorry. Dan Young. John Hall.
Present.
Joe Mayo. Andy Lorenz. David Kinley. Jeremy Moore. Jonathan Goldsmith.
Present.
Robert Baglio. Michael Wright.
Present.
Jesse Bank. Shweta Senior. Mike Messer. David Lynham. David Cocott.
Present.
Rich Geiske. Spencer Gardner.
Present.
Derek Hugel. Richard Williams.
I'm here.
And John Sue.
I think both John and Joe Mayo said they may not be able to make it today. So I knew
Well, it looks like we're one shy of a quorum with that
Okay.
count.
well, we can certainly proceed. Can't make any official, we'll have to check back if we make any official votes. Dustin, does that mean we also can't approve minutes and agenda?
Correct.
Okay. Well, we will check back as we move forward. Is there anybody from the public that would like to recognize themselves? Sherry Newbold.
Hi, my name is Sherry Newbold. I'm a residential architect, and so I'm on the call. I also will have to leave at 3.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. Patrick?
Yes, Patrick Hanks with the Building Industry Association of Washington. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Elizabeth?
Yeah, Elizabeth Torsky with Cascade Natural Gas. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I do
Oh,
not.
sorry, and I can't figure out how to raise a hand, but David Neiman Tabor Architects.
Hi, David. All right. So moving on to, well, the welcomes and introduction. What I will do is take a brief moment. We can see if we can monitor. Ardell, did you want to have yourself be recognized?
Oh, sorry, I was late. Hi, my name's Ardell Jolly. I'm the building official for SDCI.
Thank you. Dustin or Annette, if you can keep an eye on if we get any other official members so that we can approve the minutes, etc. But I will do a brief introduction. Thanks to Ardell and some comments by Patrick last time about creating a spreadsheet with topics that we can both schedule and also track our decisions. If you can share the single exit sheet, Dustin. What I've done is I have created a spreadsheet, and you will see that it has I could jump to a bit of it. I'm waiting for you. There it is. So it has a date scheduled, date discussed. So my plan would be for us to kind of set a schedule so people know when to expect certain topics to come up. The reason I didn't at this point is I wanted to hear back from the fire folks who were meeting. I think it was the Thursday after our last meeting. So see if, what report back from them, but we've listed the topic, what is in the current Seattle code, what is, and then where each topic is as far as the WABO appendix. So this is what was originally submitted and is our single exit baseline document. So that's the document that we're working with, and then where it's located in the UABA appendix. So if you're looking for a particular issue and you're not sure exactly where it is addressed in that working document, you can find it. And then the final column is Washington Building Code. So that's going to, that would then, when we make a decision, if we make a decision, we would put it in there and put, to be honest, I'm almost wondering if it's, we can say when we, yeah, I was going to say add a comment section would be good. So we can, talk about why we made the decision, and then maybe even in the comment section, put the date as far as which meeting we made that decision. So anyway, I appreciate both the comment from Patrick, and I appreciate Ardell's input on coming up with a spreadsheet, and hopefully we can prioritize and start making decisions on topics. If Dustin, if you could pull up the one for the multiplex housing, you will find that it is not filled out nearly as completely, in fact. And basically what I did is I created a document, and then I filled out, Ken Brulette had created a list of topics that we needed to discuss, but they were relatively general. I added those lists, and I know that we did not add I don't think we added the sound transmission, which we should. So my ask will be, and we can get into more detail as we get into the various topics, but people review these, and obviously on the multiplex housing, let's reach out to Dustin. Dustin will be the one who will manage this, and reach out to Dustin if there are topics that we need listed. And again, I know that there are a lot more detailed topics. For instance, I know there's structural limits. There probably will be 3 or 4 or 5 different topics under the structural limits that we will want to talk about for the multiplex housing. So I'm looking for everybody to really give their input on what those topics need to be. And then I did list the legislation just because I think, again, some of these topics are covered under the legislation, not all of them, but obviously the top 2, the number of units and the number of stories, are directed by the legislature. So, so that is the methodology that I hope to proceed with in the coming meetings. And I asked for everybody's input on filling out the topics on the multiplex in particular, although also if there are things that need to be added to the single exit list, that's great. Let Dustin know. And I will, if you have any thoughts on schedule, I am going to start to try to fill in a schedule, meeting number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, so we can start understanding when we're going to be discussing these items. So another tool, I know that we've gotten to the point where we've listed a lot of topics. We've delved into a few of them, but I think it's time for us to really start making some decisions and moving forward. So with that, I see Shweta and I think Jeremy as well. So can we go back through attendance and just make sure that we have a quorum?
That is what I was going to raise my hand for, was that Shweta join us. I didn't see the other one, Jeremy Moore, is here as well. So with those 2 attendees, we have a quorum.
I have a question, Dustin. Do you, if for some reason I have to slip out for what I have going on, do you still have a quorum with just the other?
Yeah, so your
Attending.
alternate, Jonathan Goldsmith, is here.
Okay.
So if you have to slip out, he'll take over your slot and we will still be doing business.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure I've got a little bit of drama going on. I'm going to be bouncing in and out. So thank you.
Gotcha.
And I would ask if there were any other members of the tag that stepped in late. I don't necessarily see, but I'm not keeping complete track.
Well, staff's keeping an eye on the attendees list, and as they come in, we're updating our attendance. And so right now we're sitting at even with a quorum, and we got several primaries and alternates in here. So if you do have to leave, please just raise your hand, and we'll make sure we are keeping track of that.
So then I would like to move on to item 2 of the agenda, which is review and approve the agenda. If you can pull that up. And I will ask for somebody to make a motion to approve the agenda in a second, and then we can have discussion.
Motion to approve.
I think that was Dave Cocott. Do I have a second?
Second.
Oh, I saw Schwetter's hand go up, so.
Yes, second it.
So as discussion on the agenda, I am open to modifying this moving forward. So I'm not going to take the time now, but if you can, I think everybody has my email, but if you have thoughts about a preference on whether to have a meeting that is devoted specifically to the single exit work and then another meeting specifically to the multiplex housing, I have kind of liked to split it half and half. If there is a preference, just let me know and we'll take that into consideration as we continue to move forward with meetings. So is there any other discussion about the agenda? Dave.
No, Roger, just to clarify, I did not make the original motion. I'm not sure who did. That was Richard Williams. That was me.
Okay. I don't recognize voices yet. No.
One thing to help us with that one is if you could just state your name when you're making your motion, that'll help us clarify the record.
All right, no other comments? All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you. And then we have minutes from the July 15th meeting. If you can pull those up and page through them so there is a record. And once we're through it, I would ask everybody to, or somebody to make a motion and get a second. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve, Richard Williams.
Thanks, Richard. Do I have a second?
Second, John Hall.
Thanks, John. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? All right, that motion passes. So agenda item number 4 is the single exit work. And again, my plan is for us to spend about the first, I'm just going to say till 2:30 on the single exit, and then we will try to switch over to the multiplex housing proposal. We could jump into the topic summary, although I would ask, I don't know who all of the fire folks were in general, but if we could get a report or an understanding of where you all ended up from your meeting. That was Thursday, I think it must have been Thursday the 17th you were going to meet. Dustin, that's the one of the documents that you shared.
Yeah, I got this early this morning and didn't have a chance to post this to the website, but this is some commentary that came from David Lynham on some of the fire department criteria. And I don't see David online to talk about the content here. And I haven't had a chance to really review this. I just want to make sure to have it available for this discussion as we're moving forward.
I can address this document if you like. This is Dave Procop.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, several of us met actually multiple times in reviewing this document. One of the things that we were trying to do is to establish some kind of baseline criteria that's basically provides some of the good documentation to identify what a professional fire department is and what that criteria should be. And the most consistent one that we could come up with is the Washington Survey and Rating Bureau. They have ratings from 1 to 10 for all the fire departments within the state. The criteria is pretty specific. We're trying to get a little bit more detail from WSRB. They basically provide information to insurance companies, not necessarily requests like this one that we did. But we did receive a listing basically of how many cities are located in each of the categories. And being aware of what those categories require, being able to have the proper fire equipment, being able to have the proper staffing, being able to have the reasonable response times. Those are the things that are typically the criteria that define more of a professional department, an available department that could be able to meet the specific requirements. Most cities are going to try and get as high as possible, but there are usually a lot of other things that are included in this, including inspections, permitting process, just the public education. There's a whole bunch of things that go into the ratings of this. So what we came up with in following the basic requirements is that normally what we'd have here is it would have to be a rating of 1. There is only one in the state, and that is Seattle. Rating 2, there's only a few of those that are in there. I think there's like 16 or something like that. I don't have the list in front of me, but I can provide that to the tag if they'd like to see that. David was going to do the presentation, so I'm kind of stepping in here for him. But what we did know is that the departments are the level 3 or so are the ones that typically would have the aerial capabilities, the better response times. So we set the standard as that, that those departments that have a 3 or less for numbers would automatically be considered for this. We did put the exception in there that if they don't have a 3 or less for the whole area, but there are certain service areas within the jurisdiction, that could be approved and or determined by the fire code official, so that, for instance, some jurisdictions that do have aerials, but they're only in one part of their service area, not the other service area, which creates too much response time. That certain areas or certain jurisdictions could be declared as spaces or locations where these facilities, either the single exit multiplex, would be able to be constructed to be able to meet the requirements that we're basically looking for. So when we looked into it, we broke it down to a number of different areas that basically typically where these should be going to. That our decision from that is going to be that it'd have to be in multifamily residential development areas basically controlled by local comprehensive plans. We didn't necessarily want to be telling people which zones to put things in. We'll leave that up to the local jurisdictions. We start talking about water supply. Rather than creating our own unique requirements for this, the fire code already has information for that. And if there are no local plans or local ordinances, then the fire flow should be determined by Appendix B of the fire code. Not every jurisdiction adopts that, but is the basis for what a professional fire department should be able to have in place. Next one is fire hydrants. You can have a lot of things. You can have the good response time, you can have the good equipment, but if you don't have the proper hydrants, that is a significant concern. Again, the model fire code has a table for that about the spacing of the hydrants to be able to provide the fire flow required in number 3. So we refer that Appendix C would be where that you'd be able to determine what requirements you would have to have for the site fire flow. Next one, number 5, is the fire department access roads. Many of you may or may not be aware that the state has not adopted a large section of Chapter 5 of the fire code Legislative direction under the RCW is that the state does not dictate road design. That has created some issues. There are at this time 11 counties that do not have a code update process. Therefore, they adopt the model code as published by the state. So those 11 counties, unless they have a local jurisdictional approval for it, which most of them do not, they do not have any requirements for fire access roads. That's kind of an interesting flaw that's within the codes that we have. Most of these jurisdictions, counties are in the eastern side of the state, northern eastern part of the state. It's been kind of challenging that they try and refer to that, but they really have no code process to update anything for their jurisdictions. But what we've settled on here is that if we follow the basic requirements of the fire code in chapter 503, section 503, and appendix D of the code, that provides the basic requirements for what minimum requirements would be for fire access. So that kind of gives the background for what we agreed to between the group of us that represent the fire chiefs and fire marshals for cities and counties. I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Dave. And Dustin, I just wanted to make sure
Did Roger freeze up?
It looks like he froze up.
He did.
And so we'll give him a couple seconds to maybe catch up. But does anybody else have any questions for Dave? While we're waiting on Roger. Spencer, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious about the reference to the comprehensive plan, and I think what you're insinuating there is that this would only be allowed in areas where multifamily housing is allowed under the zoning code. I guess that just seems like an unnecessary duplication. I mean, it's sort of assumed that if it's not allowed by the zoning code, these aren't going to be built. But maybe I'm not understanding what the purpose is there.
I think that our intent was to try and work with the zoning code with that, but if there's that language it can be modified to accommodate that, we're open to that. We kind of had some discussion with that because you're talking about fire people who deal with building codes, not necessarily zoning codes.
Dustin, I just wanted to let you know, I got dropped twice. I think it might be my computer, but in case I'm not.
Okay. I'll be ready to stand in, and then if you drop off permanently, we'll address it. And maybe I think Dan's here, and he might be willing to take over for you.
Yeah, I'm here if that happens.
Okay.
Dan.
All right. So Ken, your hand is up next.
Yeah, can you scroll up to number 1? So where it says rating less than 3, is that supposed to be 3 or less, like the exception?
It's intended to be that way, yes.
Like a less than or equal to?
Yes, a three or less.
Okay.
And I am gonna make a general comment in that this is the first time we've seen it. I want to thank everybody that put their thoughts into it. It looks very complete and well thought out. But I'm envisioning people are going to want to sit back and think about it a little bit and look at it. So what I would hope, Dustin, is we fill this in, but recognize that we haven't necessarily. I think we need time to look at it, and then eventually it needs to get integrated into our working document. So exactly where and how we'll need to think about that, and that's a little bit. I know that Ken's going to be after us to make sure it is proper code language, which I appreciate very much. So,
yeah, and from our standpoint, that's what we intended this to be. This is the base document that we're looking for comments on.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments on these fire code, fire department criteria?
I had a question that so at some of our previous meetings we talked about like if one of these buildings goes into one of these, highly rated areas, what is the likelihood or possibility that they are derated beyond where we're at? And if that might be a little bit outside of the scope of where we're at, just kind of defining professional to fire department. But I was curious, David, if you have any insight on how often a jurisdiction might find themselves derated due to changes in budget or dynamics across their jurisdiction.
I think that one of the things that we really didn't discuss it too much, but I think that what we were thinking about this is at the time that the project was applied for and project was constructed to. Once it's constructed, we can't derate that project or take it down to something. But it would mean that the next project coming back in, if they're no longer meeting these requirements, they would not be able to be able to do what they need to do for that point. But we didn't necessarily put it into this document here, but that's something we could definitely consider.
I have a comment and a question. My comment on Dustin's question is that happens all the time. There may be you could build a high rise, right? And then if the fire department doesn't maintain for budget reasons or whatever, I think that cities are still faced with that issue of, okay, now we have these, how do we maintain that level of service to them? And then my second question, Dave, is the WSRB, is that different than the organization we were talking about last time?
I wasn't involved in the meeting last time. I believe WSRB is the only one who does this work, so I'm assuming it would be the same group.
Okay.
I think it's the same one.
Yep.
There were some questions about that, and I'm again, if that is the best, I think that's for us as a group to decide. If this is the best we can do, keeping in mind that it is as simple as possible to as simple and straightforward.
It utilizes an established criteria base, which is consistent. Yes, there is some question about whether that's going to be changing or not. So there may be some modifications to some of the requirements, but I don't necessarily think the rating numbers to scale is going to change or anything like that. So obviously, if that were to be significant, then we would have the opportunity to make some changes to that.
Okay, thank you. Rich Gieske.
Yeah, and in kind of answer to Dustin's question, I think we already kind of look at this in the code. We look at it for fire flow, we look at it for, access, we look at it for a lot of things, and typically those decisions are made at the time of the development. And then if the jurisdictions decide to, reduce the heights in their water tanks or change their water system design or that kind of stuff, we don't go back on buildings and reevaluate individually what that change means. But hopefully the jurisdictions are striving to maintain what they currently have. I think when we start looking at jurisdictions and they're unincorporating and all that because of taxes, that's a whole different conversation. That's probably beyond the purview of this particular conversation of how do we define what a professional fire department is when we're looking to kind of increase the risk or the reliability of the exiting, right? Going from multiple exits to a single exit. So
Spencer.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful for me to see the list of communities that meet the rating of 3 or less as I'm thinking about this. And one of the concerns I have is the legislature a few years ago adopted House Bill 1110. I think this effort is maybe somewhat of an outgrowth of that. And that requires communities in many areas of the state to allow for middle housing. And I just want to make sure that we're not contradicting or contravening the purposes of the legislature in expanding where middle housing is possible. So maybe being able to overlap the communities that are required to meet the requirements of 1110 with the fire rating of 3 or less would be helpful.
Yeah, and I was going to ask the same thing, Spencer, and I guess I would like to see cities that are rated 4 and 5 as well, and Dustin, maybe if you can if somebody could put population next to those, that would be an interesting thing for us to look at and just see if we are missing those. So, Dave?
So I have requested that information from the WSRB. As I indicated, they respond to insurance requests, not necessarily these types of requests. So it's being taken to their board and their senior officers to see if it's something they're willing to be able to provide. But if they're able to, whatever information we can get from them, pass on as soon as possible.
Well, I was just going to comment. I like that while there was conversations last time about whether that was the right thing or not, I like the way you've done it. You know, if you're not level 3, you can, the fire code official still can determine whether they, you know, consider, and maybe the exception needs to be expanded to give some criteria for the fire code official to look at. But, so, Todd?
Hello.
Hello.
So this is I've been following the CAL FIRE effort a little bit also, and one thing I've noticed is that they really break apart each one of these concerns, and I don't know how we're going to get there, but I'm curious. In my mind, as we talk about 1 through 6 stories and 1 to 4 units per floor, or I know some have proposed even more, you know, to me that's a big matrix that on any one of these issues we could say, where is it a concern about, you know, about egress or so forth. We should be able to fill that matrix out, red, yellow, green, or something like that, and kind of visualize where our concerns are. One concern I have overall is we are targeting that 6-story, 4 per floor maximum, and not considering the spectrum in between it all. And that maybe is okay. That's how our codes work. But I'd love to hear the conversation more about each one of these issues. Where do we get concerned? Some things might be at 4 stories, some things might be 5 stories, some things might be number of units per floor. So anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Todd. I will remind everybody that professional fire department was part of the RCW. Wasn't defined, but it is in there. So David?
Thank you. Apologies for being late. I had other things that just ran over. David, thanks for filling in stuff for me here. You know, when we started putting this thing together, one of the things that always came back to me is, you know, we've already got an area where, you know, with growth management, where this stuff is limited. And we're really trying as an effort to put those decisions about what your community is going to look like based upon, you know, the local people. You know, what is acceptable to your community. For those communities that buy a level 1 fire department, you know, that comes with response time, that comes with a robust prevention bureau, that comes with, you know, community risk reduction. There's a lot of ways to get it. And we really think this meets the intent of the legislature. And here's the conditions under which it would be acceptable. And if we think about it with growth management, you've got to be a pretty large fire department with a large population, with pretty dense urban areas to want this. So, you know, we're kind of getting it in areas where, of course, it would apply, and where the chances of you already having this infrastructure and in need for this type of housing in it to take place. And it's kind of, we kind of got off the "we hate this idea" trick and kind of switched to, okay, so if we're stuck with it, what should it look like? So hope it helps. Thank you. Sorry I'm late.
Thanks, David. Spencer?
Yeah, that background's really helpful for me. And again, pointing back to House Bill 1110, I actually think that's one of the concerns that the legislature was trying to address, is that some communities can exempt themselves from a certain level or style of development. And the legislature has pretty clearly said that is that is of concern, and that they are trying to find ways to prevent that exact problem. So I guess the concern I have is that to the extent a smaller community that's within a larger metro area can use a desire to not invest appropriately in their fire infrastructure to get out of some of the growth requirements that the legislature seems to be indicating are really important. That's concerning to me. I'm not suggesting that we should ignore the fire concerns, but we want to balance that with the legislature's desire to make sure that housing is accommodated in all communities, especially those where there are growth pressures.
Thanks, Spencer. And yes, I agree with that. And I was going to say, I appreciate you bringing that up. I haven't delved into the language of House Bill 1110. So certainly we need to take a look at that. And then and then whatever the bill was that created the RCW that we're trying to match. So obviously we need to compare this to the legislative intent and make sure we're comfortable with it. I will say, I really, after thinking about it in the presentation, we have been talking about risk, right? And the best information for risk is probably the insurance companies. So just at a 10,000 foot level, it seems like that might be the right place to go. So again, I think it's great work. Dustin, I would make sure that let's work those 5 points into our matrix. I'm not sure that you need to copy everything. Let's get this document posted, summarize it in the matrix, and then everybody dig through it, and we'll be able to offer comments. Hopefully, at whenever the next schedule is when we're going to talk about it. So, okay.
That's good.
So now I'm kind of thinking that we should go back to the matrix, and I'm going to have a discussion at the end of agenda item 4 about our schedule for meetings. I think at this point, I'm wondering if we should not just go from the top, start going through items at today's meeting, since we haven't scheduled them out. See which ones we think that we can, I think that the top 2, the 6 stories, some of those are just pretty much clearly required in the legislation. So if we can go up to the top, and you're doing that as we speak.
I can pause it.
Okay. I just am thinking, so my thought is going through a number of these items, if there is general agreement on them, let's fill them in, and at the end we will have a single vote to approve those items. If there is a controversial one, we will set it aside. But my hope is then we can go through a bunch of these where knock as many of them off as we can if we are pretty confident that we know what the answer is. So, and Ardell, do you want to take charge of this, or do you want me to run through it? I know I'm putting pressure on you, and if you are uncomfortable or not able to, please, I can certainly go through it, but I know that you have a whole lot of knowledge on most of these issues as well.
I can start and see how it goes.
Okay.
If we just want to go in order, number of stories total is located in section 1. So does everybody have the code change proposal from WABO up? That's what we agreed to as what the committee agreed to as the starting point. And so the column that Dustin is sharing in WABO appendix is going to correspond to an item number under Q101.1. So it was drafted as Q101.1 with charging language, and then 18 provisions for the tag to discuss. So the first one was number of stories total. And that's in item 1. So 6 stories above grade plane that is in the RCW. And so I guess, does there need to be any further discussion on capping it at 6 stories?
I'm not seeing any hands. And I believe Ardell, the above grade plane is probably the best way to define it, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Number of stories served by the single exit And this is legacy language out of Seattle's code, and that with the single exits you'll see out of New York, as well as other, New York and Seattle, these were kind of driven by the architecture at the time of these provisions being developed. And so the idea of a single exit, while the building can be 6 stories, we have a provision that says not more than 5 stories of R2 is served by the single exit. And that means that that grade level, that first story, and this is how it generally works for in Seattle, when you get to a 6-story building, that first story has a secondary exit. So if you think about the primary entrance to the building, and the single stair is really serving those upper floors. So if that went away, then you would have 6 stories potentially served by the single exit. Roger, do you want to call on folks, or do you want me to?
It doesn't really matter, but go ahead, Todd.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Ardell.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be the one to ask. I think we need to answer the question of why not 6. At least have that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not beholden to these, Todd. I think a lot of the
Oh,
WAMO
by no
discussion
means.
was like, let's
just
leave it to the tag.
I think someone needed to ask the question, so thank
Yeah.
you. Yep.
Patrick.
Yeah. Well, I have a comment, but I guess first I'll ask a question. Going through this, are you just trying to like identify how much like disagreement or discussion any one item is going to have, and then schedule that later, or do you want to have those discussions now?
What I would suggest is, because we haven't scheduled them, I would like to go through items today. We can have a motion to approve all of the items today, and in the discussion about the motion, if somebody says, I don't think that the number of stories of 5 is resolved yet, then, they can make a motion to remove that one from the approved. I'm trying to group them together. So does that answer your question?
A little bit, yeah. I would just say, in the long run, I worked on the energy code tag and was part of a work group on the energy rating index, and we were able to get a lot done in a very brief amount of time. And one thing we did up front was kind of identify, kind of like this list, here are all the major items, and then we color coded it based off, is it just kind of a minor thing? Is it a big thing? Is it a big thing that we are going to likely be able to agree on? Is it a big thing where there's going to be disagreement and we might have competing versions that we have to vote on or send up to in our case, the tag? So if you're just like, ultimately, I think at some point it might be helpful to kind of that. I was just going to say, this is an item that we think is pretty important. We think the RCW says very clearly it needs to be 6 stories. So we just think that's an item that is significant and should be discussed more.
Okay, fair enough. So then I would almost, in the comments section, Dustin, add to check against the RCW language. If serving 5 is contradictory to the RCW language, then we can have that discussion. Ardell, would you like to respond to that? You're shaking.
It's not in the RCW to serve 5. It is a 6-story single exit building in the RCW. And just as some background, I think it's how far ahead of model code is the state proposal going to be, and that's just some of the history. I'm not saying it needs to be 5. I'm saying that was the language. A single exit can go to 3 in the table. How many stories above that are you pushing? That's all.
Okay. Spencer.
Yeah, I guess some of this can wait for discussion when we're actually ready to discuss, but I still think it would be helpful for me to understand the differences between 5 and 6 when we're talking about quantifying the risk. I understand the concern is there is more of a risk, but So just a second for Todd's question, why not 6? And then the second is a question about how since I'm not familiar with the building code, if there was a hallway, for example, on the first floor that had 2 exits, but then the upper floors were all served by a stairway that went into that main hallway, would that only be a single exit, or does that first floor have a means of egress through the secondary exit that the other floors do not have? I guess I'm just trying to understand how, in terms of design, what this prohibition would entail.
Ardell, I'm going to look to you if you.
Well, I got David nodding, so I don't know
I
if
just,
you
I
if
just
you
have a
wanna-
similar question, but I
Sure,
just
sure,
don't
sure.
quite understand how it would work.
Yeah. So how this how we see this play out is in a 6-story building, that the 5 stories above grade are served by the single exit, and that has continuity down to grade level that exits directly to exit discharge. There can be a communicating door to the first floor out of that stair to the remainder of the story at grade. But the story at grade will have a secondary exit. And generally that is the primary entrance to the building. So that's why it's not been an issue. And again, that cap was was originally, my understanding, was put in as a how far out ahead of model code are you with number of stories served by the single exit. So if you think of it as 3 stories currently is permitted to be served, do you want to go to 5? Do you want to go to 6? And going back to your question, Spencer, of what's the additional risk? It's 4 more units, right? Or however many more people. I don't have a, there's not a, I think it's going to be the collective judgment of the committee to decide if that's an additional risk. That's okay. And there's also just some tie in there also to building area limits for type 5 construction. So, again, going back to the history of this was around what does the building code permit for types of construction? So we are primarily seeing this in type 5 construction over a 1A podium, right? So if take away the podium, I'm in a 5-story building served by a single exit. That's a 5A building. Hold on, I could be off. Let me look at my height and area limits. Then that would meet the provisions of this code. So it's again, it's kind of building around the single exit to the typology that the building code allows for what this construction is typically, which is 5A construction.
I'm just going to comment. I understand we're all thinking of the 5/1. That's kind of the standard, but as we write this, we need to be aware that people may do something different. So consider that. Jonathan Goldsmith.
So looking at the bill, I think it's pretty clear that it says single exit for multifamily structures up to 6 stories and not, talking about the podiums of the 501. So I think it needs to involve 6 stories.
Yeah. I mean, if this is at a point where you're willing to go to 6, then I don't think you need to discuss it further.
Go ahead, David. I have an opinion, but I'll wait.
Sorry, David Neiman.
Yeah, David Neiman.
Yeah. So I just wanted to clarify. I think what you're saying is essentially it's a 6-story building. All 6 stories can discharge down to grade. The stairs continuous all the way down. They're just not discharging through the lobby. They're discharging out the side. And
That's
then
correct.
and then whatever units or whatever functions are at the main floor have to have a separate discharge. They just, other than going into the stair, which is customary. So
yeah, yep.
Okay.
Like it's not been an issue. There's also a limit. Thanks for bringing the discharge provisions up. So there is a requirement that if you're going to egress through the lobby, that's only permitted for 50% of your exits. So if you are a single exit building, you would not be permitted to egress through the lobby because that would be 100% of your exits. So there is already a requirement elsewhere within the code to have that stair discharge direct to the exterior.
Yeah. I guess my last comment on it is it doesn't seem like a problem, but also doesn't seem like it needs to be there at all. It
Yeah.
doesn't, it's like the fact that you have to discharge separately kind of makes it all happen. And you probably don't have to tell people not to enter the building through the stair. And, you know, because you need a lobby. So.
Yep.
So I would, you raise questions, but if I were to interpret the language of the RCW, I think 5 levels above that. I believe as it is presented now with the first floor exiting somewhere else, I think that we would meet the intent of the code. You know, we can get into that conversation. I think that we need to continue to think about what happens to the people on the first floor. And to be honest, if I were to opine on whether the risk is acceptable, I think that there are other things that we're going to talk about, like sprinklers, like number of units per floor. I mean, I know that we've all talked about 4. I'm the one that keeps suggesting, well, what about 6? So that would play into this conversation as well. So I'm going to suggest that we move on and keep this as one that there's more conversation to be had about it. But Todd, if you have a comment.
Yeah, I was going to reinforce that. I think our American prescriptive minds just can't separate egress from construction type, and we're getting those two things, you know, kind of combined in here. So we're going to talk about construction type at 8.
Okay. Dustin, could I ask, in the number of stories total under the Washington State Building Code column, you just put 6? I don't think there's going to be controversy about that, and then that's something that we will vote on at the end of the section today. So occupied roofs.
So currently there is the RCW has 6 stories of R2. An occupied roof is not a story, and an occupied roof does have an occupancy. So an occupied roof could be considered a small B, which can be considered then under Chapter 3 provisions part of the primary occupancy if it's accessory. So it's could also be considered an R2. Sorry, this is probably too much background, but then depending on the size, it could also drive to an A occupancy. So how the WABO group, WABO and with input from Washington Association of State Fire Marshals agreed on was to put a prohibition on a common roof deck, regardless of whether it was a B or an A, and still permit private decks up to 750 square feet. And the discussion at the time was to discourage large assemblies having to use a single exit.
So if I were to clarify, you can have a 750,000 square foot deck, but it basically has to have a stair right from your 6th floor unit.
Correct.
Up to.
Yeah. And the idea was that as a private unit, it's an extension of your unit and is most jurisdictions, I believe, calculated as an R occupant load, not an assembly occupant load. And there's provisions around egress from occupied roofs as well. So hold on, let me see if I can pull that up. So I think that's the ask of the committee is what is the how do you want to look at occupied roofs? Does it matter if they're private or public? And do you want to allow it or not?
Dave? Coca?
Just something that came up in one of our facilities similar to this is if it becomes a shared use, does it have to be ADA compliant? And if
Yes.
it is, then we start looking at elevators and other things as well. So I think it's viable to not allow these just for the cost savings that we're looking for.
John, go ahead.
Just for clarity here, presuming that we still have 4 units per floor, you could potentially have 4 750 square foot private roof decks on that roof, right?
Yes.
I did not follow Dave Colcott's comment. Could either Ardell or Dave explain it to me, the shared occupancy? If it is the way it's written right now, it would not be shared occupancy, right? You're shaking
Dave,
your
do you
head.
want to clarify?
Well, basically, it's not written that way. It just says we just can't have an occupied roof. But if it was shared more than 1 unit, then it's a common space.
Mhm.
Common spaces in buildings have to be ADA accessible.
So the way it's written right now, the private roof deck must be serving only that unit.
That would be an interpretation of this, yes.
Okay. Richard Williams.
Yeah, I just point out too that there's other situations where an accessible elevator is going to be required, accessible means of egress provisions. So it wouldn't just be this, there are other occasions when it's required anyway. So.
Yes, and I think my hope is we're going to be able to go back and review all of these decisions. So as we get down to the elevators and accessibility, if that changes what our thoughts are on the occupied roof, then we can come back and change it. Todd, go ahead.
It's maybe the right time to ask this. I to my knowledge, haven't heard a conversation yet about number of occupants per floor as being a factor. And I bring that up now because unlike the code change that's going into rulemaking in the IBC, which limits the occupiable roof to 50, right? I mean, we're not going to have that kind of situation, I don't think, here, right? With only 4 units per floor, we're going to have a pretty small roof deck. Is that a consideration that would start to inform this?
Well, at the 750 square foot, Todd, I think that's as a plans examiner, I would expect our staff to look at that at the 200 square foot per occupant. So if I'm looking at, sorry, you're gonna 3,000 square foot footprint of occupied roof associated with 4 units, then I'm still looking at a relatively low occupant load. Once I hit assembly occupancies or even a B occupancy, I'm looking at that 750 as having potentially 49 occupants, or I'm looking at either a 5 to a 15 square foot per occupant load factor for a commercial a B occupancy or an A occupancy versus the R2 occupant load factor. And you do start seeing larger occupant loads then. So
that's helpful. I'm hearing it's already inherent in your thinking.
Yeah, that
maybe,
it's kind of built. It's built into
yeah,
it.
it might be helpful for some
Yep.
of us. Yeah, we just write it down, and that's interesting. Thank you.
Ardell, I have a related or similar question because I don't calculate occupant loads that often. So if we said that a unit was 3,000 square feet, which I think is max, and my assumption is these are going to be less than that. With the 3,000 square foot unit with the 750,000 square foot deck, you would use the 3,750 divided by 200. And I come up with 18 occupants. And my first
Hold on,
question
let me
is
catch up. I'm just going to try and pull up the occupant load tables, and I think that may help.
So So my first question is to all the architects, am I doing my math right? That I would add the deck square footage to the unit square footage. And then I do think it's kind of an understanding of what is the occupant load, and did we have a square footage limit in here or not?
We have it listed, but it's as one of the items to discuss, Roger. It's
Right,
like
right.
3 down. So
Okay.
the occupant load factor for calculating number of occupants for a residential occupancy is 200 gross. Means of egress sizing is based on number of occupants. This is the single exits, assuming, you know, nominal, like that these are not assuming it, but the way we've seen them designed, when you have 4 units, it's still a relatively low occupant load.
Mhm.
And that would be, so then if I switch to an assembly occupant load factor for a common roof deck, then those are at 15. You could, some places may ask you to do 5 to 7, but an unconcentrated tables and chairs assembly occupant load factor is 15 net. So Roger, your example was 3,000 units. Is that 3,000 square foot units?
A unit is 3,000 square feet with a 750 square foot deck that is
Yeah.
accessed only, serving only that unit. So it is not.
Right, but egress is cascading. So I wouldn't, the egress from the unit does have to be sized for the unit. This is testing me now. The unit and its accessory, including all its spaces. So, however, if you think of like egress as a 2-story unit, like those people are moving down and these people are moving down.
Yeah.
So I think that you could make the argument that they're not in the stair at the same time.
Yeah. And related, I know it's a question I'm going to ask. The standard stair width, what is it? What is the occupant load before you kick up and have to go with a wider stair? Does anybody know that?
It's 36 divided by 0.15.
It's
Rich, maybe you know that off the top of your head.
It's 50 occupants.
Yeah, for stairs, it's 0.3 or 0.2, depending on if you have the alarm system and proper requirements. Doors would be 0.2 and 0.15. And then what else? So yeah, you'd have to, based on that, you'd have to figure out what the number of occupants permitted would be. I can do some math, but what else was I gonna say? Yeah, I was gonna just also reinforce that the occupant load going down the stairs is not cumulative, just like Ardell said that, but you know, it's not added up as you go all the way down. So you're not gonna end up with, that's the stair load. It's individually calculated per floor.
Okay. All right, are there other comments, questions? And I am curious if folks would have general agreement that the item number 3, the way it is written, where it is certainly only that unit, is there general agreement? Or is this something that we need to continue to banter about? I know Dave's in favor. Okay, thanks, Dave. Dustin, if you can move that under the Washington Building Code section, and I think if you just list it. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Occupancy R2 apartments is the way it is currently written, which I like. But is there anybody that has concerns about that it's too limiting? I think that that is the intent of the legislation, that it is R2 apartments. I know there was a discussion at one point that does that preclude it from being R2 condominiums? I think the conclusion was by labeling it apartments that it does. But, and I think and that's, you know, could they condominiumize it later? Probably. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, we run into this quite a bit. You don't really find condominiums in the code, they're apartments. So it basically means the same thing. So
Okay.
there is no difference between them except when you get to the property ownership and the breakdown of that. So the code does not handle them differently.
Okay, thank you.
Would
All right,
it
is there-
serve to call them maybe potentially instead of apartment houses, like dwelling units potentially?
Apartment houses is the code term in chapter 3.
Okay.
Okay, so is there general agreement that R2 apartment houses probably make sure that that's included in there? Spencer, go ahead.
I just want to confirm what I'm understanding from this, and that is R2 apartments does include condominiums, so there would not be any issue with building a condominium that uses this. And I just think that's important because state law currently, notwithstanding, condominiums are probably an important part for the housing market and for home ownership opportunities. So I just want to make sure we're considering that.
Okay. And yes, the answer is condominiums are still included at this moment. All right, so just Dustin, if you can move R2 apartment houses, add that word houses on it, and this is, and the next one might be something that we have more conversation about, and that is construction type. So Ardell, can you explain construction type? You have the Seattle code just says 1 hour minimum, and now the WABO proposal has all of a number of different.
Yep,
building
those
types.
are all sort of effectively getting to the same thing. And I think, again, going back to the history of the code, you would get, it was actually called type 5 1 hour. It was, you know, and so this is just catching up, I think, in the WABO proposal to which ones are 1 hour construction. And again, why does it ask for 1 hour construction? And that's you're getting a higher, you're increasing the number of stories. And so what can you do to improve the fire safety and the exiting within the building? And you can do that, one with, you know, all the egress provisions, with the fire sprinkler, with the fire alarm, like what are the enhancements that you get back? And so this is pushing on 1 hour construction as the requirement. Note that there are already provisions in the building code for 1 hour separation between dwelling units. And there's already a provision for support of 1 hour construction with rated construction all the way down. And so this explicit requirement has not, to my knowledge, really been pushed on. It's been in our provisions since the start. But again, that's for the tag to discuss.
Any questions? Ardell, I actually wonder why we have type 4A in there. Why would anybody do type 4A if type 4B covers 6 stories? Type 4B is for 12 up to 12, right?
Yeah. Again, it's why would anybody do 1A, Roger? I mean, you could take all of these out if you wanted to,
Sure.
and
Okay.
only say,
Okay.
you know, it's starting with sort of the lowest is the 5A, and then for heavy timber is that's the one that I think is potentially debatable on whether that is 1 hour construction or not. But I think that historically it's been accepted as comparable to 1 hour construction. That's but I'll kick it to others
Okay.
on the call.
Well, I'm happy to ask the difficult questions here. I know this will make people uncomfortable, but I think maybe to get to that, it'd be nice to have a discussion and find our limits on all of these, because obviously we know a 5A is not going to make it to 6 stories, right? So if I was coming into a jurisdiction with an alternative materials design and methods approach here, where would the talking points be? Would it be a 5A plus? Would it be a 3A plus like in Seattle? Is there such thing as a 4B or 4C minus, where we're you know, I know this is, you got to do that very carefully if you're going to propose that, but are there things like that we should be talking about, where we either let off some of the 1A 4B requirements or increase the 3A 5A?
Okay, John?
Yeah, I think mine's 2 parts. First, that the 5A construction referenced here is not allowing 6 stories of 5A construction, because you'd be otherwise limited by the other tables of the number of stories in 5A. So that's the first thing to clarify. And then the second, seems like we need the 1A, because you could have a podium building that has a 1A and a 5A together into it to get up to the 6 stories.
I could see somebody looking at this and say, if I'm building this, this is going to allow me to build 6 stories of type 5A. So I think, well, Ardell, you're shaking your head, but should that item number 6 say, considering all the other requirements of the building types, limits of the building types?
This doesn't relieve you of the code.
Okay.
So the code still applies to table 5 limits for construction type and height and area and story.
I
Still apply.
wonder about clarifying that and strengthening item 6 that very clearly says you have to go. I could see somebody arguing that, well, I'm doing everything under Appendix Q. And Appendix Q says type 5A is acceptable at 6 stories. I'm agreeing with you, but
Yeah,
I could see
I don't.
somebody.
I'll defer to the others.
Okay, Richard?
Yeah, Roger, I don't agree with that. Because if we did that, we'd be laying out the entire code here, right? I mean, we are deferring to the rest of the building code for everything else, and we are modifying the requirements of chapter 10 in this appendix as specified per these items. But everything else would apply. Otherwise, like I said, we'd be here. It'd be a very big section, very big appendix.
Okay, and if everybody thinks that in the charging 101.1 general that's clear, that's fine. I was just kind of wanting to make sure. So
Can I go back to Todd's question
yes.
though? On I think what are other construction types that aren't on the list, right? I think that's part of it, Todd. And it's where the primary frame is not 1 hour or more. So 4A, B, C are all more than 1 hour, right? So if you wanted to bring me that proposal, Todd, use 4A, B, and C, go for it. But what you're missing is type 2B, 3B, and 5B. And I think that so if you wanted to propose those for this, I think you'd still have provisions for, as per chapter 4, on residential occupancies. So I don't know that that would even be an issue, I guess. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. There's a lot of architects on the call.
I'm actually going to recommend, Todd, go ahead, but I'm going to recommend that we put this in yellow under the comments and we have further conversation about it. I think that it's complex and, but go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, that'd be my recommendation, is that this is one of those, like to Patrick's point, one of those areas where somebody would have to come with a proposal and start talking about what they would propose. I know some are uncomfortable talking about the Seattle provisions, the type 3A 6-story with a horizontal 2-hour separation. But those are the kind of things I'd be curious to hear the group talk about. With a type 4B, a lot of us were in the room there for why those are pretty close to performance. We understand the performance requirements of that because that's fairly recent, right? But in that, I could see opportunities to say, well, why is certain things 2 hours? Why are certain things 2 hours if I have a very small, floor plate, things like that, right? It's nuanced for sure. Thanks.
Okay. The next is the dwelling units per floor. And Ardell, I'm happy to take this one because it's a topic that I brought up a number of times.
Sure.
My personal opinion would be I would like to see 6, and particularly if it is in addition to 6, there is a limit to the total square footage of the floor. My thinking is 4 corner units and 2 studios. I could see that configuration being proposed and number one, and a good way for us to figure out to build more housing. So if there are limits by a total square footage limit, and or if we are doing talking about, we haven't gotten to sprinklers and that kind of thing, but if there were additional requirements, if you went to 6, if people were concerned with 6, but I just, part of at least the intent of the proposal or the legislation is to increase the number of units, housing units. I think that we could capture that, but I'm certainly open to hearing other comments. So John, go ahead.
Yeah, my recommendation would be to strike this altogether and use the exit access travel distance as the limiting factor. So you could have as many units as you can get as long as they're not more than 125 feet away.
I think if you could put both of those,
I didn't mean to put that in a separate cell.
Oh, yeah. Add it to the 6. I mean, I think that's another way. I understand the concern. And that also is kind of why I wanted to get to the total occupant load that we're trying to get through the stairs. Which I think also would be limited by the total square footage. So Richard.
Yeah, Roger, I guess I still am in favor of sticking to a limitation of the number of units per floor. And this is maybe jumping ahead a little bit, but if you went to 6 units per story, know that you would express some interest in keeping all the requirements for the single exit and the multiplex housing and corresponding appendices, which makes me wonder, like, if we allowed 6 units per story in the appendix, unless we modified the base code language in 1006.3.4, the only way you could construct like a 2 or 3 story building, unless we modify this appendix, would be to provide all the protections in this appendix, right? It's like a 2-hour stair enclosures, stair pressurization, etc. And I don't know that that's what you want to do. That's probably something we can discuss. But unless we add some additional language in this appendix, it seems to me that's what we would end up, unless we modified the base code. Does that make sense?
Well, I think that we are modifying the base code, are we not? In this particular case, if you are building something under Appendix Q.
No, I'm just saying, I think my understanding was you didn't want to modify the actual code language in the base code. The modifications would occur, but occur through this appendix, right?
Yes. Yes.
But unless you went into section 1006.3.4 and changed in that table 1, if you changed, unless you changed the number of units allowed, the only way you could get to 6 units per story for a 3-story building would be to go through this appendix.
Yeah. So when you say the code, the base code, Richard, you're talking about the table for a single story exit that goes up to 3 stories currently.
Correct.
Okay. I got you.
That's a little in the weeds, but it's just something to keep in mind because, it gets a little bit confusing unless we're pretty clear about it.
Okay. I'm going to ask, go ahead, Ardell, you've got hands up. I want to listen, and then I'm going to probably suggest we push this off and have further discussion. I think those are all very good questions.
I do want to just, John's suggestion of the travel distance as the limit, that is something that at the WABO worker we did discuss. So at 125 square feet, if you put the stair at the center, and this is really crude, John, so apologize, but and if you travel distance is measured in perpendicular spaces, so if I just put a square that cut that distance in half, and I have a graphic here I can share, but I don't have control, or I'll just email it to Dustin. That's about, if I take that 125 divided in half, so it's 62. 0.5 as sort of the distance out from the center of the square. So my 125 is the square's area. It's 125 by 125 feet. That's 15,625 square feet. At an occupant load factor of 200 occupants, it's hold on, 15,625 divided by 200. We got to 78 occupants. And so that's with a very sort of crude calc on how many occupants could you have on a floor plate at its absolute max, with the limiting distance being 125 for travel distance. That would get you 78 occupants, or about 80 occupants. And so from a what's the right number? I don't know what the right number is, but that again, that 4 cap goes down to the current single exit cap of 4 units per floor.
Or no, you had 15,000 square feet using your diagram, which I would be interested in seeing it. Doesn't have to be immediately, because again, I'm thinking that we push this off as further discussion, but and my comment would be 15,000 square feet is, sorry, I'm an engineer, I don't do math in my head because I don't trust my brain. That's 3,000 square foot units. Those are large units, and what I would see is 6 units per floor, understanding there's the issue with the model code, 6 units per floor, but you limit it to a total square footage on your floor plate. And now you're limiting it that way, but you get 6 units per floor rather than 4. And even from the, if you look at a developers from the income side of the equation as to whether this makes sense or not, I think that renting out, I know they do it per square foot, but renting out 6 units rather than 4 of the same square footage, I think that they would get a higher income, which would make it more feasible for them to build. I think. Again, I'm not a developer either, but go ahead, Ardell.
And then just one other thing, when you're increasing the number of units, is there an increased hazard? And so when you have more units, that adds to the number of kitchens and the additional hazard to the stair itself. And so you've got more doors, more kitchens. So it's increasing the risk. That's all.
Well, let's put it in there. I mean, there are folks have presented reasonable arguments why we shouldn't, but I don't feel like I'm ready to give up on it. I want to continue to see if there is a way for us to manage that. So, well, should we maybe jump down to maximum square footage, jump down to? Because I think that that is related, and I would be happy to kind of tie those two together. Is there anything other than the dwelling units per floor that would limit, that would determine the maximum square footage requirement? We're assuming there's zoning and all those kinds of things, right? You have to meet all of those, but Richard?
Well, yeah, with just chapter 5 requirements, you know, the area per story would already limit that.
Okay.
So when it says no explicit limit, that's not technically not true. There's already limitations based upon what we look at in chapter 5 already.
Okay.
Based on type of construction and various factors.
Which, is that ever going to come into play, I suppose?
When you figure in the number of, if you limit the number of dwelling units and you limit the travel distance, I think a lot of these limitations become,
yeah,
you know, kind of boil it all down to some fairly static,
yeah,
you know, things.
That's why I think, in fact, I'm going to request, Dustin, if I see the exit access travel distance. I don't care. I mean, they're related. I would wonder about getting the maximum, the dwelling units per floor, maximum square footage, and travel distance. Group those 3 rows together. I think they're related.
So you said the number of stories, the dwelling units per floor, and max square footage you'd like to see grouped?
The travel distance, exit access travel distance.
Okay.
And all of them are yellow. I think we need to have further conversations about all of those. And while Dustin updates that, I'm going to move on to the high-rise prohibition. The WABO appendix is yes, it cannot be high-rise. Right, Ardell?
Yep. And that's an
And-
item 4. It's just it's explicit in the WABO proposal. The Seattle code is silent. However, we just we don't have an explicit prohibition. Again, you'd be limited by construction type and the 6-story. You can have mezzanines though and still be considered a 6-story building. And so it is possible to be a 6-story building and kick into high rise. It's not typical though.
And the way that it is written, if you have an occupiable roof, it would have to be below 75 feet. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Is there anybody that believes we should not have a prohibition on high rise? John?
I was just gonna say, I've had buildings that have been 6 stories and run up against the height limit, so I think that's a reasonable thing to put in, that it should not be a high rise.
Okay. Dustin, are we moving too fast for you?
Maybe a little bit. I got this stuff grouped together for the previous stuff. So do we want to say yes, there's a limit on the high rise?
I believe it's yes. And I would copy the discussed at the 7/29 meeting, yeah. And then the one that you haven't done is right below that, exit access travel distance, 125 feet, row 15. That
Oh, I
would be-
gotcha.
That would be the one that I would ask to group up with the maximum square footage and be yellow. So Ardell, can you let us? Oh, Todd, go ahead.
Just gonna ask a question for future conversation. When we know we're not gonna come anywhere close to the maximum square feet per story for the construction types, what does that mean to people? I mean, for example, if I were to put a type 4C and I'm in my allowances somewhere in the 70,000 and I'm only gonna have a 7,000 square foot floor plate, what does that mean? What does that in terms of risk factors? So again, not now, but I don't know. Thank you.
So you're suggesting that when we're talking about risk and what we're comfortable accepting, that you could have, according to chapter 5, a very large floor plate and we are limiting it to smaller?
Yeah, my question is going the other direction, that how are we reducing the risk, knowing that we're never going to get to anywhere near the maximum areas in the code, right?
Okay. I don't know. Ardell, can you explain sleeping units to me? Because I think you showed me one floor plate that had a unit with about 6 sleeping units.
So, sleeping unit, and I think this goes back to what is the occupancy? So, Dustin, I don't know if you have chapter 3 available of the building code.
You want the 2024 model code?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
The residential occupancies under 310 have under R2 apartment houses, congregate living facilities, which includes boarding houses, convents, dorms, fraternities and sororities, monasteries, hotels, motels, and timeshares. So congregate living facilities, specifically boarding houses, are excluded in Seattle, and convents and dormitories, frats, monasteries, those all are sleeping units. Hotels are sleeping units. R2 apartment houses are dwelling units. And so that's the exclusion. I think that the WABO proposal already speaks to it as an R2 apartment house and doesn't need to further exclude sleeping units because it's specific to R2 apartment houses. If this committee wants to expand the scoping from R2 apartment houses to other types of living units, we're seeing lots of different co-housing models and configurations of housing that the other parts of the state don't necessarily see. And so that was language that we had. I don't know that it's necessary. The proposal already has R2 apartment houses. It's specific to dwelling units and the number of units per story. And so a sleeping unit is not the same as a dwelling unit. A sleeping unit would not have all the components of a dwelling unit, which would include provisions for sleeping, cooking, and sanitation. Does that help, Roger?
It does for me. There were a couple of hands up, but then they came down. So maybe you explained it sufficiently, Dave.
You did explain it sufficiently, but the building code council chair in me comes in and says, hey, it's 2:35. We should be switching.
Oh,
sorry about that.
Thank you, Dave. All right, well, can we get to where now I'm looking for the list. There you go. So sleeping units. I think, is everybody comfortable with R2 apartment dwelling units only is a sufficient answer that it does exclude boarding houses? And that's in 101.1, which is defined as apartment houses. Dave is. Okay.
Sorry,
Yeah, go ahead,
hi.
Swetha.
I was just going to say that there are congregate living units like co-living units where you have kitchens and bathrooms that are common, but then you have rooms, and those could be part of this. To Ardell's point, there are other types of living situations in here that we should be able to accommodate with that. In terms of risk level also, because there's fewer kitchens. I think it should be okay, but just putting that out there.
Then, Dustin, I'm gonna have the sleeping unit question be flagged as a yellow. Shweta, it seems from a code perspective, by opening it up when Dustin was looking at chapter 3, or I think it was, if you could kind of look at the building code, R2, and try to expand on a little bit and see what you think might make sense, and come back with some thoughts on why that would make sense to you.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay. All right, so thank you, Dave, for keeping me on track. We've made some progress. So I guess I would ask for a motion to, what was the term we used previously? It was in the minutes. Tentatively approve those items in the that are not yellow.
It was provisionally approved.
Conditionally approved, that was the word.
So moved.
So moved by Richard, okay?
Second.
Nice.
Dave Cocott.
Thanks, Dave. Is there other discussion? Dustin, if you can, or whoever's sharing, if you can page it down so that everybody can see the items that we did, that we are, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Spencer, go ahead.
I just wanted to confirm we're only talking about provisionally approving the ones that were discussed today. So there are still more on the list that we'll talk about in the future.
Yes, and in fact, the conditional approval is row number 4, 6, 7, and 12. The ones that are highlighted, we are going to have further conversations about. Okay, John?
I was just going to say that the last conversation about potentially adding congregate units then brings row number 7 back into question where it says apartment homes only.
Okay. Well, all right. That's why it's a conditional approval, recognizing that as we change things below, we might need to go back and revisit those. But if we can, the architects on the call, if we can make sure that we keep that on track as we have that discussion about sleeping units next time. So I'm going to have a quick conversation. Right now, I don't know that we set it in stone, but there was conversation about having this meeting every other Tuesday starting today. I am going to, I guess, open that up for, actually, I would ask for a motion. I would like to make that a little bit more official because I know I would like to plan on it as I start to fill out my schedule. So I would ask for a motion to officially make our meetings. Go ahead, Dustin.
Did we take a vote on that other motion that's still open?
Oh, no, we did not. Sorry. So is there any other conversation about approving, conditional approval of those four items? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? All right, thank you. Now I would ask for a motion to regularly schedule our meetings the second, every other Tuesday, starting on July 29th.
How about a motion for a short break?
I was going to do that, but I was trying to get through the meeting
Okay.
schedule.
Okay, I move for every other week.
Thanks,
Tuesday.
David.
You got it.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, thanks, Spencer. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Last time I got in trouble by saying a 5-minute break, so I am going to say we are on a break until 2:51.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Dustin, are we back? Dustin? I see you moving documents around.
I am sorry I was on mute and video off, so nobody knew I was just talking away over here. So no need to restart the video or the recording. I never paused it. But just as a cleanup for me as we get past this, I don't want to do it right this second, but we want to add those fire department topics to this list as well.
Yes.
And I'll do that. And once we're done with this today, I'll publish this back out for our next meeting.
Yes, I think that some of them were all in, maybe not all. So let's just integrate those 5 items into this list.
Okay.
And I will just, I will think about whether just continuing on through as we've been doing it makes the most sense, or if we schedule things, but I'll see about adding the dates on the left-hand side. So I appreciate all the work, and sorry we went long. I actually was getting excited because we were making progress. Let's I did kind of want to go through all of the topics that were listed just to make, so if you can click here on the agenda there, just to go through the list, and I have a suggestion for us to start. So the documents that are up are the discussion topics that Ken put together, the baseline document, revision 1 comments. Marcus Johnson gave us some comments on revision 1 of our baseline document. There was a cost benefit analysis study on fire sprinklers that I appreciate. I think we will rely on that or refer back to that when we get into the sprinkler conversation. And then the multiplex housing topic summary. If you can, as I suggested, the summary on the multiplex housing is pretty basic at this point. I didn't have time to, while I created it, I didn't really have time to expand it. I would ask for a volunteer. I can do it, but I would actually ask for a volunteer to take the baseline document that we have, that already is pretty complete, and update this topic summary so that we can attempt to go through it in a similar manner for the next meeting. So I don't know if there's somebody that would be willing to take those 2 documents and try to match them, expand the summary. If not, I'll see about having Dustin or I do it, although we both share a number of things on our plate as well. So, okay, I don't see any hands up. Because this document is relatively basic at this point, my suggestion for us for the next hour is to go back through the baseline document and start making our way through from the top. Dustin, what I might do is ask you to have the baseline document, but then also have Marcus's edits and or comments. So as we're going through that, we have those available to us. I don't know if Marcus is on.
I do not see him on in the guest list today.
Okay.
And just a heads up, the baseline document, we voted last meeting to incorporate the comments John Sue had. They're not shown in red or anything here, but that is the change on this baseline document. Hold on, I think I should have the R1 going here, and I may have messed that one
I clicked on, I thought that there were some modifications made, but
Oh, this is the wrong document. I opened the wrong document. I opened up the single exit stuff. So give me 1 second.
no.
Yes, so we have the multiplex housing baseline document R1. This document has all of the changes suggested by John Sue incorporated into this one. But they're not shown in red. They're just blanket incorporated in here so we can see specifics going on here. This underline up here is just for changes to the model code or not model code, but 101.2. We have a suggested change there and a suggested change in the definitions to add that stuff in. The rest of everything is new appendix, so no underline, no strikeout shown in here, and all of John's comments are incorporated there.
Okay, so part 1 up above is the changes that would have to happen to the residential code itself to direct us to appendix XX, correct?
Correct.
And my question is, if you can you, oh, there it is. So the red on the right is Marcus's comments, edits. And I would support the edit to the definition of multiplex. We talked about this last time, and we took the definition directly out of the RCW, but the comment about a functional primary street entrance or a building of up to 3 stories containing up to 6 dwelling units, basically that second part is covered in the first sentence, particularly if we have a building of up to 3 stories containing 3 to 6 dwelling units consolidated into a single structure with common walls and floors. We had general agreement at the last meeting that that definition for multiplex was complete enough. So I'm going to ask for anybody that has problems with that or challenges with that to speak up. And if not, I would ask that Dustin, I'm not sure how we want to do this. I would like to request that we change the multiplex definition as per what Marcus's markup is. I don't know if you can copy and paste, but that's fine. However you want to update it. Yeah.
So that change on the right is reflected here with the plain text.
Yes. And if there are issues that we bring up that are controversial that people don't agree with, we won't make a change. But I guess I would ask that at the end of the meeting today that we can call this revision 2 with the changes that we make to it. Okay, so going down to multiplex buildings, the user note, I like including the user note because of the appendix. I would ask if there are opinions on whether we should actually reference RCW. Now I don't have it right in front of me, but
you're looking for the one that directs us to do this work?
yes.
That
I would like-
is 1927-800.
Okay. I would just at the end of construction of housing per RCW 1927-800 add that to the end of that sentence. That's about this appendix.
Would it be better to say in accordance with? I don't know.
I'm
just
not an
words.
attorney, but I like actually in accordance with, now that I think about it. Rather than per. And I'm trying to keep an eye on hands. If anybody has concerns about what we're doing with any of them, speak up or raise your hand. I just don't have enough screen space. Let's see. So, scope. And did Marcus have any comments? All right, thank you.
So Marcus did have some comments on the scope at the end here. This section here, he's proposing to strike.
And given our, yeah, you can see. Yes, I am in agreement that that sentence should be excluded because it almost says you have to build it for the IBC. Does anybody have questions or concerns with getting rid of that last sentence? Okay.
Go ahead and strike it.
Yeah. I don't see any hands going up. I'm wondering about crossing it out, but let you.
We'll have this, the revisions will kind of illustrate the
Okay.
changes here, and I'll put comments on the sections that we changed.
Okay.
That way people can go back and look at the meetings.
All right. So scope, multiplex buildings meet the following conditions. So no interior stairs or corridors except when located completely within an individual dwelling unit. Is that? Oh, Spencer, go ahead.
My comment was actually about that one. I wasn't sure if we'd skipped it, but I saw Marcus's comment asking if that needs to be or is going to be changed. I know there was some discussion about it. It sounds like he didn't propose any specific changes here, but I also think that's something we want to talk about. So just wanted to flag that.
We can talk about it now for a little bit. Angela, do you want to?
Yeah, I was asked to put together the code. Can you hear me?
Yes, but you're a little bit soft. Just because I'm going towards the camera, I have poor hearing anyway, so.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I was asked to put together the code sections to include interior circulation areas, and I have not completed that yet,
Okay.
but I will be putting that together.
So Dustin, if you can add a note to number 1, that we will have or highlight it. I don't know how you want to flag it, but we'll have continued conversations about that. I don't have I'm looking at number 2. And the use of any portion of the building is limited to residential apartment use only with no common use areas. So my first question is the definition of apartment the same in the residential code as the building code? And I don't know the answer to that.
I think the argument might be that apartment's not really used in the residential code.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see a definition.
If you give me a minute, I can look it up for you.
Thank you, David. Angela, go ahead.
That was added to make sure that it was clear what type of residential uses we were talking about. So this wouldn't apply to hotels
Yeah.
or other residential uses.
Yeah.
Residential uses are defined and cover a wide gamut of types of buildings. And so it was suggested to clarify that we are talking about apartments, which do not take out condos or anything like that, because condos are a form of ownership. They're not a type of occupancy. The word apartment is taken directly out of the IBC in the R2 occupancy type to describe the use.
Okay, so my question is do
We don't have a definition in the state adopted IRC for apartment.
okay.
It's only in the IBC.
If necessary, we could add it to this appendix.
That's kind of what I'm suggesting is I think my understanding is the intent is that this is apartments, so we need to clarify that. But Richard Williams, go ahead.
Yeah, I just to second what Angela just said, I think it's really important so that we don't get into the use provisions of the IBC, which we're not trying to do, and also so that we just make clear what we're talking about. And that will help us with accessibility requirements and things like that. And some of the later information that they laid out in here, thinking particularly about accessibility, relies upon the R2 designation. So
yeah,
I think it's important.
And so it is talking about use. It says residential apartment use, not being a technical code person. Does the language of number 2 need to be different? I mean, I think we all want to limit it to residential apartments. I'm going to leave that a little bit to Angela. Go ahead. Or did I interrupt? Okay. Jonathan.
So while there's no definition in the residential code for apartment use, there is the R201.3 terms defined in other codes. So basically it says where terms are not defined in the residential code, they shall have the meaning described in other code publications of the International Code Council. So we can use the definition of apartment from the IBC.
Okay, thank you. So the note, I think, I don't know what you have there on the note, Dustin. I think that needs to be, we want it to be a residential apartment. I think I would just make sure it gets edited to match up with the IBC.
So if we're going to add a definition to this section, one of the things I'll point out is in other appendices, section 102 is kind of reserved for the definition. So my suggestion would be to drop a new 102 section in here, labeled definitions, where we'll include that definition and renumber everything below this to one number down.
Well, Jonathan said, I didn't get the number, but that the code already accommodates if there's a definition that's not in the IRC that you go to the other I codes. So the way I take that, you could modify residential apartments to just read residential apartments, and then is it italicized or capitalized? So it is a defined term.
Just italicized, but I think if it's italicized in this text, it would need to be included somewhere, is what the probably end code users would be looking for somewhere.
All right. Jonathan suggested that already, you would go to the building code, for clarity. Do we add a definition section? I think it would be, you can make an argument for it. Rich, go ahead.
We just put R2 in line 2. Use of any portion of the building is limited to an R2 residential use only.
That is an apartment building.
Yeah, but I didn't think that there were building types in the residential code.
There's not, but it points you back to the building code where the definition is, and you're using that same definition in the fire code as well, in the next paragraph down.
There are other types of R2 occupancies.
Yeah. I think it needs to be R2 apartment occupancies. That's what we used in the single exit, didn't we?
Yes.
I mean, my thoughts on that would be that the single exit is within the building code. In this, we're making an appendix for the residential code.
Yes. Well, I am, again, not a technical code person, but it sounded to me like if there's a defined term in the residential code that is not specifically in the residential code, then you would go to the building code for it. But Marcus, do you have a?
Yeah, and I was just gonna suggest, I think that's based off of what Jonathan said, that sounds like a potential option. I guess another option is to go back to into the part 1 section, and you have the section R202 definitions, and essentially potentially add the definition there. I don't know if that's better than doing that within the appendix or not. Just a thought that came to mind.
Right.
Since we have a definitions in the Dev 202, but that might apply to all of the residential code, which maybe we don't want to introduce that. So I don't know. I just throw that out there as an idea.
Okay. Richard, go ahead, and then I have a thought.
Yeah, Roger. Yeah, I guess just throw my 2 cents in that I probably would not be in favor of adding a building code definition into the residential code. And I think
Okay.
that's in line with what Jonathan was saying.
Okay. So Dustin, then you are correct. I think that at this point, I think there's general agreement it needs to be residential R2 apartments or residential apartments. We need to figure out exactly the best way to accommodate that. I am going to move on to item number 3, the total floor area. We did talk about that last time, 8,000 square feet. That was based on, what was it? An average unit size of, I think, 1,300. I forget who came up with that number.
It was based on 1,200 square feet and were then rounded up.
Yes. So I think we have a general agreement on that, unless somebody raises their hand, is concerned about it. Building shall not exceed 3 stories above grade plane and shall not exceed 60 feet in height. And sections R314 and R315, I'm assuming, are the mezzanine and loft within the residential code. Okay. Is there anybody, item 4, does that sound all right? The paragraph on the bottom about that we got rid of them, just that definition for group R2 apartment occupancies, we need to be clear on the definitions there, Dustin. I think we all agree that what's written there needs to occur. We just need to make sure it's correct code language. Okay. And so XX 101.2 modifications. Did we review that WAC number? And is that WAC number the one where for residential modifications, they need to come to the State Building Code Council if they want to modify it?
Correct.
Okay. David Neiman.
Neiman, thanks. Yeah, I just before we go past this section, I just wanted to touch on the requirement that you follow all the provisions of the International Fire Code for R2. I mean, I only have passing familiarity with the fire code, but my memory of it is that it recapitulates large parts of the building code. Chapter 7, 9, 10, like the big ones that get into fire rated assemblies and exiting and sprinkler and fire alarm and fire life safety. And it's the big stuff that's associated with big buildings. And it's, you know, the rules that make 300 unit apartment buildings so complex. And so I couldn't really tell you chapter and verse, which are the ones that are most inappropriate for residential code, but it feels like it seems innocuous, but this feels like it's taking large parts of the building code and importing it into the residential code.
Good comment, David Lynham.
Thank you. It's actually the opposite. The fire prevention methods that you're talking about, the fire alarm systems, the sprinkler systems, a lot of that's actually scoped within the fire code and then taken into the building code. So if they wanted to do it, most of the provisions for requiring sprinklers and stuff have been removed at all in the residential code with applicability. So, you know, those fire protection measures start out in the fire code, they come to the building code, and many of them are omitted by state law into the residential code. So it may be necessary to drag them over for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're talking about the same thing, David. But it's essentially the effect is that a lot of the most difficult and complicated and expensive provisions that occur when you do R2 construction under the building code are, I think, effectively getting imported into the residential code this
they'll
way.
pretty much have to be if we're going to make it part of it. Otherwise, we say you build this like you do a regular house, which would be inappropriate. So I think we're agreeing.
Can I ask a question of the group? So back to the definition for apartment. My note is to bring it from the IBC, but I don't find that definition in the IBC. Could someone tell me where they pulled that one from, and I'll pop it over here while we're discussing?
Is it in the Washington 2021 Washington State Code? Was it added there?
Yeah. Give me a minute. I'll be right back. I'll look it up for you. I'll pull it up.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you,
David. Angela, your hand was up. Put us down to you.
Yeah, no, I'm good.
Okay, Richard.
Yeah, I don't believe there's a definition for it in the IBC. It's embedded in chapter 3 where it talks about R2 occupancies. It's one of the use types. As far as a straight up definition, I don't believe that it's in there.
Okay, it's not italicized in the model code, and I don't find
Right.
it in our WAC
Right.
either as a state amendment.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure I'm pulling it from the correct location as we do this.
Well,
Yeah, I think that's correct. I'm just not down that far yet, but I think he's correct.
Maybe a bit of concern when when we go back to single exit discussion in terms of dwelling versus sleeping units. I mean, again, that same kind of deal, right? Where it's not defined. The apartment, the term apartment is not defined. So, but it is in chapter 3, and I don't know the exact section number, but I believe it's like
310.3.
310.3. Yeah, it's the first item.
Okay.
So what they're doing, I believe, is just identifying the specific use, the specific type of R2 occupancy that we're intending for these requirements to comply with. And that's important because, otherwise you'd be potentially opening up to non-transient hotels and motels and other kinds of uses which we don't intend to bring into this. Really don't want to.
And I guess my comment would be if it's not defined specifically, we probably don't need to add it as a definition.
Yeah, I don't think I would try in that case.
David Lynham.
Oh, yes, thank you. State adopted IBC 310.3 residential group R2. So residential group R2 occupancies containing sleeping units or more than 2 dwelling units where the occupants are primarily permanent in nature, including lists of about half a dozen things there. The first one is apartment houses. So we've got a definition of it in the IBC there.
Yeah, but it's technically not strictly, it's not a definition per chapter 2. It's just listed as a specific type of R2, which is what we're keying on. I mean, that's the point of why we're pointing to that. But it's technically it's not a definition, not a chapter 2.
Dave Cocott.
Just also pointing out that with there is no definition in the code, it refers us to the Merriam-Webster, and there's definition now. So it's with a lot of other things that aren't defined in it. So it's a clear definition within the dictionary.
Well, I think that we all know that it wants to be apartments only and we want to exclude. We need to make sure from a code perspective, we're doing it right. So let's just make sure that we are comfortable with how we're addressing that. I want to go back to David Neiman's comment. The way I read the last sentence of the highlighted paragraph about multiplex buildings is unless otherwise specified. So that means if we don't address it in this appendix, multiplex buildings designed using this appendix shall comply with provisions of the International Fire Code for group R2 apartment occupancies. Are we not, I think this is David's question, are we not bringing in all of the commercial fire code requirements for R2 apartments in, it is almost like that sentence is all inclusive, like we're going back to commercial fire code. And maybe I'm wrong, but what parts of the International Fire Code for Group R2 apartment occupancies are we not addressing down below in this document would be the question that I would have. David?
Yeah, and David Cocart can help me out here, but I think the provisions that they're bringing over from the fire code for the R2 include the provisions for sprinkler systems and for alarm systems. As far as the building requirements for that, it's still going to be housed within the building code. But we want to make for sure that these things are carried over. So the International Fire Code requires all buildings with a building occupancy to be sprinkled. So these are going to be sprinkled as well.
I would agree with you. I just that sentence where we're referring back to
yeah, so you'll besides that, you're going to have to provide access requirements like it is supposed to be in the fire code. If you need an emergency responder, radio communication system due to your type of, it's all those provisions that apply for, life safety of the buildings and the firefighters as well.
Sure.
So unless this document says that sections don't apply, it applies. And we might look at, over here in, fire protection features too. There might be some language to help us out there.
I just go to the first sentence there is basically saying a multiplex building that doesn't comply with the pieces up above need to be designed for the IBC, which I can see that. All right, if you don't meet these requirements, then it's kicking you out of the appendix Q and you have to go to the IBC to build the whole thing. If that second sentence is meant to do the same thing for the IFC, I can see that it would be correct to do that. It's almost like putting an and multiplex buildings are basically International Building Code and the International Fire Code. But the way I read that second sentence there is, again, almost bringing all of the, in my understanding of what we've been asked to do is create everything you need to do to, if you meet the 4 requirements up there, you can build this under the appendix, including building and fire requirements. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, this is actually coincidental with another proposal that's being put into the IRC, that there is a paragraph in the fire code that states that certain parts of the fire code are supposed to be met by the IRC. So there is a proposal into the IRC tag to put that paragraph in the IRC so that somebody in the IRC is aware that there are provisions of the fire code that have to be met.
Right.
So I think that there could be a correlation here, because if that language gets moved over to the IRC to say, yes, it's site fire flow, site access, outside systems such as solar, there's some very specific wording that's in the fire code that says the fire code applies to the residential code in these areas.
Okay.
Then we could actually remove this.
Okay.
If that proposal gets approved.
Spencer?
Can't unmute. There we go. Yeah, I guess I would agree. This seems like almost two distinct issues. And I do have concerns about the wording related to the fire code. It just seems really broad. I think I'd prefer to make sure that we're more targeted with what kind of requirements we're bringing in here. I think that's consistent with what the legislature is looking for. And I am aware of the parallel proposal in the IRC committee. I think it's good to be aware of those things. I just don't want to move forward under the presumption that that does move ahead. And what I'm hearing, Dave, is that this they almost happen in parallel. So if that other one does move ahead, then this almost becomes moot. Anyway, that's all.
Dustin, I would add a note to it, to that last sentence. I think that we need to, have further conversations about it. If we can dial into the number, the code change proposal, the IRC, put that in the notes at some point. I think we just need to continue to consider that.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge with this tag, because we're looking at a code that another tag is looking at the code as well.
Yeah.
So there does need to be a correlation on this one, which makes this one very challenging.
Yeah. And add a correlation with the IRC proposals. All right, we have a half an hour left, and next on our list is XX 102 fire protection features. I want to jump too far ahead of Dustin. Dwelling units in multiplex buildings shall be separated from each other by wall and floor assemblies having not less than 1 hour fire resistance ratings and corresponding of the following. Prescriptive fire resistance rating assemblies in 721 of the IBC were tested in accordance to ASTM, were established by an analytical method in accordance with 703 2.2 of the IBC. I think we talked about that last time, and there was general agreement that those were okay. And I thought that one of them got added as added, is that right? Is that one of Ken's additions, was to add one of those?
Let me pop out.
I think it was one of John's suggestions, and I think the number one was the added kind of language as a third option.
Okay.
If I remember correctly.
And I thought that there was general agreement that made sense. So unless there's somebody has concerns about it, I will move on a little bit. Continuity fire resistance rated floor ceiling assemblies separating dwelling unit shall extend to and be tight against the exterior wall, and fire resistance rated wall assemblies separating dwelling units shall extend from the foundation to the underside of the roof fitting. I have a general understanding of what that paragraph says. The wording seems a little bit odd to me, but I'm going to leave that up to the technical code people, if that makes sense, or if that's complete enough. Supporting construction, floor ceiling assemblies separating dwelling units shall be supported by construction have an equal or greater to fire resistance rating. I think that makes sense.
And showing here, the new window there is showing the John Sue
Yeah,
changes made last week.
yes. And he was the one that added supporting construction.
Yes.
Openings in walls and floors separating dwelling units shall not be permitted. Duct and air transfer openings between dwelling units shall not be permitted. That's accommodating both horizontal or vertical ducting, I'm assuming. David Nyman?
Thank you. I want to just comment on the continuity element. When you're doing these projects under the building code, all of the wall separations are considered to be fire partitions, and they don't terminate against the exterior wall. They terminate against the interior face of the exterior wall, which this seems like a provision that's above and beyond what's required in R2 in the building code. And then the continuity seems to apply to both horizontal and vertical. It applies to floor ceiling assemblies, which is you can imagine the extreme difficulty associated with trying to take a floor ceiling assembly and extend it all the way to the exterior sheathing where it goes through the bearing stud. So I think this is written in a way that's overly robust and beyond what's in the building code.
Angela, are you on?
I'm not seeing her in the attendees right now.
Okay, she had to jump. Who was the other author with Angela?
Oh goodness. Let me
Yeah.
see.
Let's flag that one. I think as I read it, I had a similar feeling. I think that we need to consider that. Richard, do you have thoughts on continuity paragraph?
Yeah, not to put him on the spot. I think it was Jonathan, who was alongside Angela proposed this.
Jonathan,
and I would recommend, I would also be in favor of tabling this so that we can make sure that everything's correct. Yeah, because I probably should know this in terms of whether or not it's above and beyond IBC. I just would need to check it, and that's something we should do.
So Angela and I copied this directly from the duplex fire separation.
Yeah, there you go. I should know that, Jonathan.
Okay, let's look at that one. And I'm kind of similarly wondering about the penetrations one. I think both of them make sense, but I certainly would ask people to make sure that we're.
And so I'm not on record as misspeaking. You're Jonathan, you're talking about the duplex requirements out of the IRC, nothing out of the IBC.
Correct. Duplex requirements R302.3.2 continuity.
So we're not talking about introducing anything out of the IBC. We're staying in the IRC, and we're just trying to make sure that we're consistent with the language provided.
Got it.
Although if the language provided for is complicated or we could potentially clean it up too. So
Sure. I'm just pointing out that it's consistent currently. That's all.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Well, I think if people can put a little bit of thought into those sections and review them a little bit, I think that would make sense. Automatic sprinkler system. NFPA 13R automatic sprinkler system in accordance with section 903.2.8 of the IBC.
So Roger, may I hold you up just a little bit? We've been kind of reviewing this one alongside the comments from Marcus today.
Oh, sorry, yes.
He's got a new section inserted before automatic sprinkler systems.
Okay. Marcus, since you're on, you want to?
Yeah. So last meeting, we talked about coming up with some baseline language to maybe allow for multiple multiplexes to be attached to each other. And I think the initial kind of top level was You know, 2 sixplexes attached to each other, try not to go more than that type of situation. And so the language that I put together here tried to both capture that kind of top level at the most units, but also tried to treat the multiplexes with less units a little bit, to have a little bit more attachments between multiplexes with less units, so not treat a triplex, two attached triplexes or 2 attached sixplexes, kind of the type of thing. And so I did, you know, attached buildings containing no more than 12 total dwelling units as the initial, or kind of the driver between that, so that could be split up into 2 attached fiveplexes, 2 attached sixplexes, 3 attached fourplexes, or 4 attached triplexes. Is essentially how I started this out, to try and balance those two different things that, at least in my view, was important. If it needs to be scaled back, and if there's even concern at, you know, triplexes getting to that many buildings, then we can discuss that. But and tried to tie, yeah. So the language there is to do multiplexes. I also did the townhouse buildings just because you might have, you know, the townhouses have their own code language and responsibilities, and you could potentially attach a townhouse to one of these. I don't know if people are comfortable with that. I just started off with that as within this initial language here, and then the number 2 there under there is just to make sure that the multiplexes are separated similarly to the same way that you would separate the townhouses. So with buildings by 2, not less than 1 hour fire resistant rated wall assembly. So basically 2 1 hour fire resistant rated walls on both sides of the attached buildings, which is similar to the attachment requirements for townhouses currently.
And then A, B, and C is the same as we have it above.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I will start off with a question, and I probably have the same question about townhouses. That you say 2 1 hour fire rated walls. Is that the same as 1 2 hour fire rated wall? Is it, I mean, you're getting into this requirement, you have to build 2 walls.
Yeah. Yeah. It's basically a double, yeah, trying to requirement a double wall. And I know in the townhouse IRC code, and I can't remember the section number, but there was like I basically copied the language from that, and and there was another option where you could do basically like I forget what they called it, but like a shared wall option that had a different rating system to it. But I thought with more units that having the double wall kind of situation where you have each of the fire rated walls connect to each other would be the more palpable option.
Dave likes that. I'm still a little bit, if it is a townhouse, I can see where that would make some sense. But these are also the situations where you have 3 stories that are the floors. I guess it's the continuity question that I'm still not clear on. So I'm not sure about it. David, go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm trying to think of how to fix this, and right off the top of my head, I'll have to get back to you with some other words for it. But what you're doing is you're mixing different types of housing. The townhouses are individual single-family dwellings, and this is the multiplex buildings are essentially, it's an R2. A lot of zoning ordinances aren't going to let you do that to begin with. Townhouses are separated with, you got lot lines between them. The 2 1 hour walls, the contractors always tell me those are incredibly difficult to construct, because how do you adhere that sheetrock, particularly if you're going to be 3 stories tall, adhering the sheetrock without breaks in it all the way from the top of the 3rd floor down to the basement. So there may be another alternative that we can think about there. It might be one of the high resilience walls that can be built. There might be another way to separate those. But I think that the mixed use of townhomes and multiplex are going to be problematic for us.
Yeah, I agree. And that's what I was getting at too. I know from a structural perspective, trying to build 2 1-hour walls back to back is challenging. Rather than a single 2-hour. I have a suggestion. Marcus, I really appreciate you taking a stab at it. I think you've captured, I think, most of the questions. I am going to suggest that we bring Marcus's 102.2 into our version, knowing that we have to have more conversation about it. Is there a general, are folks generally okay with that? I think it's a great first step. I need to think about the 4 triplexes. Again, I think I kind of like what you've done. For me, just that townhouse and the separation walls is challenging. But Ken, go ahead.
Well, this is all new language that wasn't part of the agenda, and I don't think anybody else has had a chance to look at this ahead of time. Is that correct? And you're going to vote on it right now to bring it in to your document?
We are bringing it into our document, but we are flagging it that we haven't approved it yet. Ken. So it needs to be discussed.
Yeah, I would just wish we had a little bit more time
yeah,
as consultants to look at this before you decide to bring it into your base document.
Well, that's how we've been attacking this, is there are a whole bunch of questions up above on this that there is not general agreement on. We know that we need to go back and revisit it and have further conversations about it. So unless folks have concerns, I'm David, your hand is up. I don't know if it's up again or still.
No, I had the comments too. I kind of agreed with Kimberly that it is new language that we have on there, and just on the face of it, I think what we've done is when you had the multiplex building, I'm not sure that I think that the intent of what the legislature was to do is to create that multiplex building. I think that by creating a methodology where you can have multiple multiplexes together, you're creating a workaround for an R2. And I don't think that was the intent of the legislature on this. I think the intent was to create a multiplex. And I don't know that, I have to talk to some of my peers with this, but I don't know that the counties would be behind that.
All right, well, if there is hesitation, you all have that section, Marcus's document was posted, so you all have it. Let's go ahead and not bring it over at this point. I know I was one of the folks supportive of trying to put at least 2, if not more, of these together. And I'm going back to the RCW does, the reason for it is that we are doing this is to reduce the cost of housing. And I know that, having 2 of these together with a fire separation or something like that makes sense in my mind. So Jonathan, go ahead.
So one of our original intents when we talked about multiple multiplexes on one lot is there's already provisions for the exterior walls in the residential code under R302.1 and .2 for sprinklered, and to follow those provisions to get multiple ones on the same lot.
Okay. I think that's great. I think Marcus, if you can kind of look at that, I'm looking for somebody.
Yeah, I think I think to that comment, and so this 102, the kind of multiplexes on being attached to each other was also connected. I know in the last meeting there was discussion as well from some people that wanted a further understanding of where the automatic sprinkler system stuff was going to fall, because I know that was another discussion item. And as you can see on the right-hand side, I also put in as a discussion talking point language to is the exception underneath the automatic fire sprinkler system, which would not apply to if you did 2 multiplexes on the same lot and they were greater than six dwelling units, then those buildings would be fire sprinklered. That's kind of the thing. The exception underneath there on the next section down below is really just getting at the fact that if it's an individual multiplex and it's on the lower end of units, plus it's plus the it's 2-hour fire rated assembly separation instead of the normal 1 hour that we have in the other parts of it, then you would be allowed not to do the fire sprinkler. So they're sort of connected, those 2 sections, but there are, I think Roger already kind of gave a good summary in terms of the thinking from the last meeting and why the language there was suggested as a starting point for people to work on.
Okay. Richard, go ahead.
Yeah, Roger, since you brought up the issue of affordability, I think it's worth mentioning that the minute you have more than 10 units on a site, you're into type A accessibility requirements. I don't think that's a shock to anybody, but just wanted to bring that up and make it clear that that's may not be a huge cost, but it's is a cost increase and a potential complexity increase as well.
And that is all in the IBC?
Yeah, and that's one of by calling these R2 occupancies, apartment buildings rather, or apartments, and also I think later in this document, we make it clear that, currently in the IRC, I think you point to R3 occupancy requirements out of the IBC for accessibility. We're making clear in this document that you're looking at R2 provisions for accessibility. And that's mainly to be able to pick up that type A unit requirement and not lose it. So, when you've got more than 10 units on a site, that type A will kick in.
All right, I think my suggestion is there seems to be some hesitation to pulling both of those sections from Marcus into our current working model, but it has been posted. Marcus talked about it. Let's make sure that we have that as further conversation. And Dustin, we're going to need to make sure we flag that. I don't want to. I suppose it will get worked. It can get worked into our summary matrix that we need to have further conversations about that. I know that the sprinklers in general are, and the multiple buildings are on there somewhere. Sprinkler type, sprinklers required. Fire separation. Number of buildings that can be strung together. I row 8. That was straight out of Ken's list. So. Okay, so let's Marcus has optional language in there. Let's consider it. 350. Do we want to hit portable fire extinguishers and fire department access and water supply? I guess if we could get through that, we would be down to section 103. Let's see. Marcus did not have markups. So.
Yeah, the only thing I had here was just the exception that I just kind of gave a briefing on. So it would just be under 102, or if the change is 102, 102 point, what's currently 102.2, the automatic sprinkler system.
Right.
13R, and then provisions for, or conditions for how you would get to the exception, which is just no more than 6 dwelling units. So at most it'd be a 6-plex. And then that 6-plex would also have to have 2-hour fire resistant rating, walls and floor assemblies between units.
Okay. So portable fire extinguishers, minimum rating of 1A, 10B, C shall be provided in each dwelling unit of a multiplex building. I don't have, being a structural engineer, I don't know what types of fire extinguishers there are. They're everybody okay with 102.3 on the left, knowing that it might get renumbered? Dave is. And fire department access and water supply. Fire department access and water supply shall comply with the locally adopted fire code. Alternative materials design or methods are subject to approval by the fire code official. That seems a little, that last sentence seems a little bit all encompassing. Spencer, go ahead.
Well, I think you're on the same wavelength as I am. I'm curious if that's common elsewhere in the building code. My understanding is that at least within the IRC, there really isn't anywhere that the fire code official gets involved, but maybe I'm not understanding. So it feels like we're adding something in that would be unusual for the IRC.
Okay, David?
Sure, I can help you out a little bit with that. You know, everything that's ever built, you have to have fire apparatus access to it, and that's in accordance with however it is that you adopt the fire code. And I think what they're talking here, and that includes homes too. Most people who have, like for a public road, it's going to be you're going to have a road or a street standard, and they always incorporate the provisions of the fire code in there. But I think that second sentence there, the fire code official is authorized to approve an alternate method of material or design to an access provision of the code. And I think that's probably what that's after. I can maybe before we come back next time, I can offer some different language for that, because that's what I think that the authors might have been after. That if you have a design for an access requirement that's an alternative than that for the code, fire code official could approve it for access. I think that's it. And most often it's they come back and say, I need I can't do the access. What can I do? Well, you got to put in fire sprinklers, or I don't meet fire flow requirements. What do I do? Well, you got to put in fire. And I think that's what they're after. I think we could clean that up and leave it.
Okay. Dustin, if you can just put a note to clean up 102.4, or at least the last sentence. All right. It is 3:54. Again, like the single exit, we made some progress. I will, David, go ahead.
Oh, I have a question, really not for the whole group, but when we wrap up, Roger and Dustin, can I just have 30 seconds of your time to ask you a question about section 2 of HB 2071?
Sure.
Thanks.
So I didn't get a volunteer to kind of integrate this working document into the topics summary. If anybody feels moved to do that work, please let me know. Otherwise, I will try to fit in trying to integrate that in a little bit better and expand that working the topics summary, and we can follow that, although seemed like pretty good on this one, pretty good progress for us just working through section by section. So I'm not sure. Dustin, yeah. You're muted.
The last topic we were talking about, the fire department access and water supply. I think that there might be an RCW that conflicts with what we have going on in that section. 1927-060, number 5 says that no provision of the Uniform Fire Code concerning roadways shall be part of the state building code, provided that the subsection shall not limit the authority of a county or city to adopt street, road, or access standards. So my feeling on that one, it rings a bell because of the WUI code topics we've had. Water supply and access is specifically not adopted in the WUI code in our last version of it. And I think that this section should read, shall comply with locally adopted ordinance, not necessarily fire code.
Okay, and I recall too that that was an issue, but I don't remember the details about it. So, David?
Yeah, so how they used to do it with local ordinances is when you're after fire code, it tells you that fire department access shall be provided with in accordance with, the adopted standard. So that'll be at a local level that they're going to be able to do that. And that is the intent of the state law, but many jurisdictions, mine included, has said that you will provide provisions with both documents so that the fire code provisions apply and the other ones. So, we can work on some language for that there to help you clean it up a little bit better. But most often that happens with an amendment of the fire code.
I recall that, and just my experience at the jurisdiction I was working with, they don't specifically adopt in relation to the fire code. But each jurisdiction is different. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't necessarily putting feet in mouth on that one.
Yeah, I can fiddle with that part too if you want. Might be able to help out clarity.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, David. All right, so we've made progress. Per our previous discussion, our next meeting will be in 2 weeks on Tuesday from 1 to 4. I don't know if I remember the date off the top of my head. And then every 2 weeks after that, I will try to, as I go through and expand the summaries a little bit, I might try to put some boundaries around that. I know that we do have a deadline. I think that we want to have this ready by the end of January, isn't that right, Dustin?
Correct.
So, and I think that we still need to think about putting this out for greater public comment as well. So I will kind of work on the dates, number of meetings, scheduling when we're going to talk about certain topics, and try to have that ready for the next meeting. But with that, we have other business. Is there any other business? Yes, go ahead, Dustin.
I wanted to float the idea of focusing our next meeting on either single exit or multiplex housing. That was something brought up earlier, and see what the group thinks on that, to maybe make some good mileage on one or the other.
It does seem like there are some people interested in one and some in the other. What are the thoughts?
My thought is that it seemed like we had good momentum, and then we had to pump the brakes and change topics at today's meeting. And so I'm in favor of either or, but it seemed like we were making good momentum with a focused topic that might have reached some sort of not a conclusion, but gotten further down the road.
I agree with you. Okay, Richard, comments?
Yeah, I agree. And I think with the single exit, I believe we can make some pretty good progress. I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward in terms of what we need to go through. I think what I would only make sure of is that we have the key people that we need. Make sure that they are available for the entire meeting, because I know a couple of them dropped off. And so just make sure that that works out.
Okay, Spencer?
My thought there is, I think the multiplex would also benefit from, at least from my brain not being pretty tired after an hour and a half of discussing single stair. So whether it's that we flip-flop every once in a while and take multiplex first, or just dedicating whole meetings to each subject would probably be helpful there for me.
Okay. I will say I get a little bit concerned with having 3 or 4 or 5 single exit, and then having us come back to this, and we're I'm gonna lose a lot of the momentum on this. I'm gonna suggest that our next meeting will be focused entirely on the single exit. And I think Dustin, I would like to get an email out to everybody so that if there's an issue with that, certainly Ardell and other folks who are involved in the single exit, let us know. But our plan will be, next meeting will be single exit, and I can move my. So that would be August 12th, and then the August 26th meeting will be multiplex housing. And I will try to get the summary document updated a little bit. Everybody, there are the two sections that Marcus added that I did address some of the questions people had. So let's dig into those and be ready to discuss those in 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So.
And Dustin and Roger, on that one, I'm looking at the attachments for this meeting, and I think the one that has my comments is like from a previous. It was like the comments from the last meeting, I think, and it's not this document on the right hand side. So I think maybe people didn't get to see this document. And let me know if I need to make it like this Word document into a PDF, if that's easier for you for making attachments or not, type of thing.
Either way, this one came through a little later than anticipated, but the making a PDF, as long as I get the document, a Word makes it easy for me to edit, and then I just convert to PDF before.
Okay. Cool. Then I can leave it as it is then. All right.
Yeah, let's make sure everybody has that, and then let's consider that, and we'll try and get the summary document updated. And yes. So 4:03, 3 minutes over. Thanks everybody for a great meeting, and I'm excited we're making progress.
And then Roger, you and I are hanging for David.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks,
All right.
everybody. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me bug you for a second. This should be really quick. I mean, I think you guys, it's a subject I brought up before.